right, so today we are in the teaching, HaSatan. Did the devil make you do it? This is part 2, okay? HaSatan, did the devil make you do it? Part 2. Now, I do want to start in Revelation. Don't get all excited. I want to hit some things I didn't mention last time in part 1. I want to emphasize just a couple things very quickly from that and from Numbers 22 that we also covered last time. Just 2 quick points. So in Revelation 12:9, it mentions 4 different descriptions, and I just want to make sure we understand the Greek, okay? So it says, and the great dragon, that's number 1, was thrown out, that serpent of old, number 2, called the devil, number 3, and Satan, who leads all the world astray. Okay, now we covered all the what that meant as far as leading the world astray and that kind of stuff, but I want us to understand. So dragon is from the Greek drakon, okay, which means dragon or huge serpent. Okay, the word serpent is from the Greek ophis, which means snake or, listen to this now, being artfully malicious, being an artful and malicious person. Oh, so there's a little creativity to being a malicious person that's in that definition, ophis. We see this, by the way, in Matthew 23. All right, so let's just go there real quick so you can see that. I might just read it to you fast before you even get there, but anyway, Matthew 23 and verse 33. Okay, it says, and when the crowds heard, they were, oh, that's not it, Matthew 22, that was 23, 33. Serpents, brood of adders. Remember when he called them brood of adders? He was talking about, woe to you, you Pharisees, you scribes, you hypocrites. He says, serpents, brood of adders, how would you escape judgment of Gehenna? Well, the word serpents there, he may be talking about the idea that they were artfully malicious people. Okay, because that's in the context of he starts attacking them pretty good starting in verse 13, okay, of chapter 23. Actually, almost the whole chapter, he's attacking them, but he really gets into this woe to you, scribes and Pharisees thing, right? And so he's showing that they are clever and artful, but they're malicious. Okay, but they're malicious. Okay, he says, you do these things, but you don't benefit the other people. Okay? Now, so that's ophis, all right? By the way, this is also the Greek word of choice in the Septuagint, right? The Septuagint, you should all be familiar with, is a book written in Greek, okay? And it has in it also the Old Testament. And so the Septuagint chose to use that word ophis for Genesis 3 when it talks about the serpent. Okay, so it uses ophis as the Greek for that, where in the Hebrew it's nachash. Okay, so here it's using ophis. All right, and also John 3:14 in the New Testament. Okay, John 3:14, and Moshe lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so the son of Adam. So again, the word serpent there is either referring to a snake, or sometimes it's referring to an artfully malicious person. So in this case, we know it was more referring to a snake, okay? So just giving you the kind of the use of the word, so we can see how it's used scripturally. Now, then in the next part of verse 9 there in Revelation 12, we had the word devil. That's diablos in the Greek, meaning slanderer or accuser, attacking another person's reputation. So we don't think of devil that way. The church has taught you to think of the devil as an entity, a person, a being. I'm not saying that there's no being that's that, okay? We're gonna see a being referred to as HaSatan here in a minute when we get to Job at some point, right? But the thing is, this idea of, he says, the great dragon was thrown out, the serpent of old called the devil and Satan, it's saying this is the slanderer, accuser who attacks people's reputations. So that's describing the actual behavioral pattern or the character that's being described there, okay? That's what the Greek means. Go look it up. I'm not making this up. I'm not cherry picking. This is just, go look it up in Strong's. That's what it's gonna tell you it means, okay? Slanderer, accuser, the idea of attacking somebody's reputation, all right? Then it talks about Satan, right? It says the devil and Satan who leads the world astray. So Satan is translated from the Greek satanas, which means adversary. acting in an adversarial role, which we talked about the other day, had to do with being in opposition, being an obstruction to what somebody's trying to do, okay? In an adversarial role, okay? So adversarial role doesn't necessarily mean accuser, although that an adversary may accuse you of something. So you kind of have these nuances. That's why maybe he mentions dragon, serpent, devil, and Satan all in the same sentence, describing the same entity. Something was thrown out. It says the dragon was thrown out. One, right? The dragon was thrown out. That serpent of old, called also the devil and Satan, in other words, called adversary and accuser of the brethren, and et cetera, right? So you know what this entity was doing. This is the one who leads the world astray. Okay, so let's make sure we kind of got that. All right, now let's go to Numbers 22. We covered that also last time, but I didn't get this point out, so I want to make sure this is added. In verse 32, and the messenger of Yahweh said to him, why have you beaten your donkey these 3 times? See, I've come out to stand against you because your way is reckless before me. So I want to emphasize, I'm not sure what I said last week, just to make sure I emphasize, a reason Yahweh, remember Yahweh sent this messenger as a Satan, okay, as an adversary, an obstructor, okay, in opposition of what Balaam was doing. He says, Yahweh may send, this is what I'm putting for you guys. Listen now, a reason Yahweh may send a Satan into your life is because your way is reckless before him. Okay, did you hear that? You need to receive that, okay? Stop thinking that some outside entity is just waiting to figure out ways to mess with you. And just all he wants to do is just figure out ways to mess with you and screw with you and mess your whole deal. No, it could be coming from Yahweh. I'm making a case that Satan generally works for Yahweh. We'll see that certainly in Job, okay? But you're also going to see this in the next references we go to in Samuel, etc. But the thing is, he is sent because your way is reckless before him. In this case, maybe not all cases, but bear in mind, a reason, not the reason, I'm just saying a reason Yahweh may send a Satan into your life or make you available to be messed with by an adversary, an accuser, an obstructor, someone in opposition, a slanderer, or whatever it is in your life, is because you may be being reckless in your ways before him. All right? That's good. That's good stuff. You know what else it means? It means that it's your fault. Stop blaming that outside stuff. Balaam was not just being messed with by this messenger who doesn't, by the way, get described here as anything but like an angel. So certainly we're not picturing some evil entity. Yahweh sent this messenger to be an obstructor, to block his way, to be in opposition to what Balaam was doing. And it says here, because you were being reckless. So Balaam caused this messenger to show up. So just kind of keep this in mind, because I know we have been taught by that horribly wrong system called Christianity. Wrong meaning they have twisted, bent, and misunderstood and misrepresented what this says in like so many ways. Okay, don't get mad at me. It's true. You weren't told this about Satan. You weren't told this about the devil. You weren't told this about any of this stuff. Oh, it's going to get even more upsetting and more distressing when you realize how much you were lied to in a minute here, okay? But let's understand here, Balaam brought this on himself, okay? Because he was being reckless. Now, what does reckless mean in this particular context? Okay? So it's not just reckless in general. He was told, do not go with these men unless they come to you in a certain way, right? Did those men do that? No. So reckless was partially following the instruction in whatever he really wanted. So he filtered the instruction through his preference. He wanted to go. So all he heard, pay attention now, because some of you guys really have this problem where you don't hear things right, because you'll hear through your filter of what you want to hear. So all you heard was, oh, you can go with them. That's what he heard. He didn't hear the part that says only if. He only heard the you can go. All right? We used to have a huge problem in this building where people would say, they would go do something. Go, well, who told you could do that? They said, well, you said. I said, maybe someday I wanted to do that. I never said, go do it. But all you heard was, go do it. So you got to be real careful with that. I've learned to be really careful. If you guys come to me with something, I say, yeah, that sounds like a pretty good idea. Maybe we'll do that someday. Someday. That's the part you weren't listening to. All you heard was, oh, that sounds like a really good idea. And then boom, you're running off with it. See, that's why now nothing happens unless I sign it. Well, you said blah, blah. Okay, make sure I sign it. Because you're not necessarily, then I would be accused of my memory's wrong. Well, you just don't remember. No, you heard it wrong. I remember the conversation, and I remember having a positive response. I also don't remember saying, let's go do it now. But you heard, okay? This is what Balaam did also. Okay, Balaam did not do what was told. Okay? He was told, let's see. Verse 20. And Elohim came to Balaam at night and said to him, if the men come to call you, rise and go with them. But only the word which I speak to you, go and do. And Balaam rose in the morning and saddled his donkey and went with the men of Moab. I don't see where they showed up. The men didn't come first. In other words, all he heard was, you could go. Just say only what I told you to say. Be careful. We are all guilty of this at times. By the way, you know where the Satan comes in sometimes? It's the one that's voicing you, that only kind of promotes you and encourages you to do what you really wanted to do and gets you to focus on only the part you wanted to hear. And you don't hear the rest. Which still goes back to you. You only really wanted what you really wanted. Did Balaam want to go with them? Yes. How do I know that? Because he wanted to get paid. Right? Balak was trying to hire him to curse Israel. So he's wanting to get paid, and he's not going to get paid if he doesn't go. And so all he heard was, you can go. He didn't hear the if, then you can go. If they come and call on you. Doesn't say that they did, though. It says, if they come and call on you, and it says that Balaam rose up in the morning, saddled his donkey, and went with them. And then it says the displeasure of Elohim burned against him. Why? Because he didn't listen. He's reckless. You guys really need to focus on this idea. Reckless is not just running off and doing, it's not just, I didn't say it wasn't. It's not just running off and doing stuff you know you shouldn't do. Okay? Reckless is also going to include often hearing only what you wanted to hear, or only focusing on the piece you wanted to focus on, so that you think you have permission to do something that you really shouldn't do. Because you heard and then acted upon only the part you wanted to hear. Because I see that's what happened here. Balaam is listening, and all he heard was, he says, okay, rise and go with them. That's all he heard was, rise and go with them. He didn't hear the if. Because otherwise you have to sit there going, that's really weird. It sounds like, and a lot of you get confused in the beginning when I first teach, they'll say, I don't understand why he got in trouble. Yahweh said he could go, and then he got up and he went. No. He gave a very specific kind of if in front of it. Okay? There was a prioritization of something that must happen or you don't get to do this. All right? There's something that had to happen first. If, then you do this. To not do it that way is reckless. And that might get you a Satan obstructing you, opposing you, creating some sort of problem in your life because it's just trying to get your attention. That messenger was working for Yah, trying to get Balaam's attention. Of course, the donkey could see it. He couldn't. Okay? We went through that during the Torah portion, so I'm not going to get into that here. But I wanted to just emphasize it's because your way is reckless before him that this may happen to you also. Amen? All right. Let's go to 1 Samuel 29. All right? 1 Samuel 29. Now, some of the verses I'm going to be using now is to help show you the context of how these words are used. So it's not, because some of you are thinking that Satan or devil is only used to refer to what you've always known as Satan or the devil. Like, you don't understand how these words have been used. So here's 1 Samuel 29, and we're going to read, let's see, verses 1 through 11. Let's start with verse 4, which is where we see this, right? So we can understand what's going on. We'll start with verse 4. But the princes of the Philistines were wroth with him. We don't know who the him is yet. We'll go back and see. It was David. And what the princes of the Philistines said to him, send the man back, let him return into the place which you have appointed to him, and do not let him go down with us to battle, lest in the battle he become our Satan, adversary. Okay, that word there is Satan in the Hebrew. Lest he become our Satan, okay, for with what could he appease his master if not with the heads of these men? So let's see what's going on here. So the Philistines, verse 1, gathered all their armies at Ephek, while Israel encamped by a fountain which is in Israel. And the princes of the Philistines were passing on by the hundreds and thousands, and David and his men were passing on in the rear with Achish. Now bear in mind, this is when David was hiding from Saul, okay? And the princes, and so where was he when he was hiding from Saul? He was with the Philistines. Remember that? Okay? And the prince of the Philistines said, who are these Hebrews? And Achish said to the prince of the Philistines, is this not David, the servant of Saul, sovereign of Israel, who has been with me these days or these years? And to this day I have found no evil in him since he came over. In other words, David's with us because he's not done anything bad with us, and he's been with us for a long time. And the princes are like, oh, wait a minute, though. He might end up being a Satan to us, because after all, could we appease his master? Is this not David, of whom they sang to each other in the dances, saying, Shaul smote thousands, David killed tens of thousands of Philistines? Okay? So they're like, we could trust this guy? Yeah, he's been hanging out with us for a little while, hiding from Saul, but, this is the guy who used to, the same thing, by the way, could have been said about Paul. What do you mean you want to hang out with Paul now? Wasn't Paul killing us? And Achish called David and said to him, as Yahweh lives, you have been straight, and you're going out and you're coming in with me, and the army is good in my eyes. For to this day I have not found evil in you since the day of your coming to me, but in the eyes of these princes you're not good. So now return and go in peace, and do no evil in the eyes of the princes of the Philistines. Okay? And David said to Achish, but what have I done? And to this day, what have you found in your servant, as long as I have been with you, that I should not go and fight against the enemies of my master and the sovereign? In other words, why shouldn't I fight with you guys? Achish answered and said to David, I know that you are as good in my eyes as a messenger of Elohim, but the princes of the Philistines have said, let him go, let him not go up and battle with us. So he says, forget it, rise up and leave, right? Next couple of verses. David is being called Satan here by the Philistine princes. Because he would have been potentially, and look, can you understand their concerns? Okay, it's legitimate. Okay, this guy used to be literally killing us in battle, and now you want us, it's enough that he lived with us in peace for a while, but now we're going to war. What if he turned on us? And now we got two enemies that we're fighting. So, you can get that, but the word being used here, this is the key, again, is Satan in the Hebrew. All right, it's Satan. Let's go to 2 Samuel 19. All right, 2 Samuel 19. And I know we don't get into these writings very often. All right. And verse 22. Okay. And David said, what have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah, that you are to be Satans to me today? Should any man be put to death in Israel today? For I do not know what I am sovereign over. Do I not know that I am sovereign over Israel today? So this verse 22 is like, okay, David's like using the word Satan. Here again, the word Satan is used as a common noun, meaning adversary, to be functionally in opposition or to obstruct. What's the context here? We'll go back to verse 16. And Shimi, son of Gera, a Binyamite, who was from Bechurim, hastened and came down with the men of Yehuda to meet the sovereign David. And with him were 1,000 men of Benjamin, and Siba, the servant of the house of Shaul, and his 15 sons and his 20 servants with him. And they rushed over the Yarden before the sovereign. And they passed over the ford to bring over the sovereign's household and to do what was good in his eyes. And Shimei, son of Gera, fell down before the sovereign when he passed over the Jordan. And he said to the sovereign, do not let my master reckon crookedness to me, neither remember what wrong your servant did on the day that my master, the sovereign, left Jerusalem, that the sovereign should take it to heart. Remember this whole thing again with him leaving and coming back as David was having his issues with Saul, etc. For I, your servant, know that I have sinned. And see, I have come today, first of all the house of Joseph, to go down to meet my master, the sovereign. But Abishai, son of Zeruiah, answered and said, should Shimei not be put to death for this, because he cursed in the anointed of Yahweh? So David said, what have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah, that you are adversaries to me today? In other words, you are opposing what I want to do. I want to be okay with this guy. You're telling me I need to kill him. So you are being a Satan. You're standing in opposition. Does that make sense now? You're opposing what I want to do. He goes, at the end he goes, I thought I was the king. Why do I need to listen to you guys? Why are you opposing me? Right? You know, I've mentioned this a few times. One of the most recent episodes of The Chosen, you could be a fan or not, I find it interesting. Okay, I'm not saying I'm a fan or anything, but I really do enjoy certain things that bring out certain things. And there's a scene or two here in the last season where Judas is having issues with Yeshua and his choices. And I'm like yelling at the TV going, but you know he's Messiah. Why do you argue with him? And at one point Yeshua says to him, you know, why are you not trusting me, type of thing. But the best is that Simon gets in his face. Peter gets in his face and says, you just said that he healed this and he raised Lazarus, he did all these other things. Why aren't you trusting him? And the reason I love that scene is because we all do that. We all question him. We all question what he's doing. David's doing the same thing right here. I made a decision. Why are you questioning me? I'm the king. I mean, he literally sits there going, for do I not know that I'm the king? I mean, aren't I the king? Why are you opposing me? You're not me. You don't understand what I'm doing or why I'm doing it. I don't have to explain myself to you. Okay? By the way, all leadership should feel that way, although I do often over-explain myself because I know you guys need to know. But still, I shouldn't have to. David shouldn't have to. You're the head of a family. You're the mother. You shouldn't have to explain yourself to your children. You're the husband or the father. You shouldn't have to explain everything to the wife or the children. They should be trusting because you should have earned it, right? Trusting because they know who you are and what you are. That's why Peter's looking at Judas like, you just described all these amazing things that you know is him, so why are you questioning what he's doing? Because Judas is like, we're here at the festival and we can overthrow the Romans, and but if that's not his plan and how it's going to be done, why aren't you trusting that? Judas got all upset because Yeshua didn't do what he wanted him to do. And so do you get frustrated with Yah, with Messiah, with anything to do with the system and the leadership and the structure because it doesn't do what you want it to do? Because you're not trusting that what's going on is what needs to happen? So David says you're acting like a Satan when you do that. When you question, oppose, attack without knowing the full story, because you can't always see everything. How many times have you had, this is something I hated as a kid, I understand it as an adult. When you told your child, or you heard this as a child, because I said so. Why did the parents say that? A couple of reasons. One is, they don't want to argue with you anymore. The other is, I don't need to explain myself, you need to trust me. Because I said so should be enough. Isn't that exactly the entirety of this whole story of this book? Our covenant is basically agreeing to do because he said so. Why are we covenanting? Because we trust that we can trust when he says so. And so here, you're seeing that the word Satan fits in the designation of anybody that stands in opposition of an authority. Why are you opposing authority? And again, that doesn't mean we should just allow for abusive dictatorial authority. Men are going to listen to this and get it all wrong, so are wives. Stop. When you know the person is legitimately what they're supposed to be. This is King David, who is legitimately King David. And they know who and what he is. They know what he went through and everything. Why are they not trusting him to make his decisions? Okay? This is a good king. The guy who came down to him trusted him. These other guys are running their mouths like, oh, you should just kill him. And David's like, if I don't want to kill him, why should you tell me what to do? Why can't you trust me that there's a reason not to kill him? Okay? I've had people get in my face when I let certain people get away with some things for a while or get away with, and people get all mad at me. Why do you let that person do that? And why do you let that person get away with it? I don't need to explain to you. I have reasons. They're mine, not yours. I could be wrong, but that's on me, not you. Okay? I've had that over the years many times where people like see somebody that I've allowed to be with the group who are clearly problematic in the group and saying, why do you allow that? The key word is allow. I'm allowing it. It's my right and responsibility to choose to allow or not to allow. So stop being a Satan and opposing the leadership's choices. Am I wrong here? Am I taking this in the wrong way? Am I misrepresenting it to my own benefit? I mean, that's what people are going to accuse. Or is that literally what's happening here? And the term, the word is Satan. Satan, okay? In 2 Samuel. Okay, the word is being used for somebody who is functionally in opposition or trying to obstruct. All right, let's go to 1 Kings, chapter 5, okay? 1 Kings, chapter 5. Now, the reason we're doing this also is that this is established chronologically way before we get to other things that we picture normally as Satan, right? I want you to understand that this is how the word was used and understood. By the way, isn't this consistent also with the idea of using this, even though we only heard the word serpent, but not Satan, what was happening in the garden? Being in opposition, trying to obstruct what Yahweh was doing, okay? So I don't have a problem with Revelation telling us that that was a Satan behavior. Okay? Now, by the way, none of these people that we just read about in Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Samuel, whatever, none of them are Satan the being. They were acting in that role, in that behavior, okay? 1 Kings 5, all right? We'll just start in verse 1. And Hiram, sovereign of Tsor, sent his servants to Shlomo, to Solomon, because he heard that they had anointed him sovereign in the place of his father. For Hiram had always loved David, right? So Solomon's been anointed king. And Solomon sent to Hiram saying, you know my father David was unable to build a house for the name of Yahweh, his Elohim, because of the battles which were all around him until Yahweh put them under the soles of his feet. But now Yahweh, my Elohim, has given me rest all around. There is neither adversary, Satan, nor evil incident. And see, I intend to build a house for the name of Yahweh. So in other words, I can do these things because there's nobody opposing at the moment. There's peace, so I can do this. But the word there in the Hebrew is Satan. He said, there's neither Satan nor evil incident. There's nothing distracting. He said, my father had to deal with battle after battle after battle and all these other things going on. He couldn't build the house. There was no way to build a house and go to war and handle all these other things at the same time. But Yah has given me a respite from all of that. He's given me peace. But the word there is Satan. All right. Again, the word there is a common noun, of course, of being functionally in opposition or obstructing. All right, 1 Kings 11. 1 Kings 11, verse 14. So we see this pop up a couple of places. I'm just going to read the single verses so you can see how it plays out. 14, 23, and 25. So it says, and Yahweh raised up a Satan against Shlomo, Hadad the Edomite. And he was of the seed of the sovereign of Edom. So here's a person, human being, Hadad the Edomite. But he was acting like a Satan. He was in opposition. He was an adversary to Shlomo, right? Verse 23. And Elohim raised up another adversary, Satan, against him, Rezon, son of Eliada, who had fled from his master. So another human being as a Satan. Man, Elohim uses Satans quite a bit. You see the pattern that's starting to form here. Okay? Elohim keeps using Satans. Elohim raised up a Satan. Right? In verse 14 says, and Yahweh raised up a Satan. Verse 23, and Yahweh raised up another Satan. Verse 25, and he was an adversary of Israel all the days of Shlomo. So again, it's saying he was a Satan all the days of Shlomo. Interesting, he was an adversary. See, but again, this is what translations do us no help. I don't know what the right word is there. It doesn't help, because if you read adversary, you don't know that it says Satan. And so you're thinking that Satan or Satan is only used referring to, as you were raised your whole life, believing in this being called Satan. I just named a couple of guys here, Hadad, and this other guy, as adversaries. This other guy was who? Rezon. These are just people acting in a role, raised by Yahweh to be Satans against somebody, to obstruct, to oppose, to interfere. Okay? And that's essentially what we should understand the adversary does, is he encourages you in places where you are kind of really wanting to be in opposition to what Abba wants. Okay? Let's now go to, wow, I got through a whole page of notes that quick. 1 Chronicles. Oh, this one's going to be fun. Okay, let's follow this, okay? Of course, it's a little bit different in the scriptures because 1 Chronicles is almost at the end of the New, Old Testament. All right, so 1 Chronicles, first Divrei HaYamim, okay, 21, all right? 1 Chronicles 21, and we're going to begin in verse 1. We'll read 1 through 4. And Satan stood up against Israel and moved David to number Israel. Notice that here they decide to say Satan. All right, so here in verse 1, Satan is kind of being used as a proper name or title, right? It doesn't say really a person. It's not naming Hadad or Rezon or some other thing. It says, and Satan stood up against Israel and moved David to number Israel. And David said to Yoav, I'm going to read a couple more verses because I want you to see that these verses are exactly the same in another place. So in case you're thinking, oh, this is a different incident that maybe we're going to read in this other place. So Satan stands up, inspires and moves David to number Israel. David talks to Joab, right, to Yoav, and to the rulers of the people, go number Israel from Beersheba to Dan and bring the number of them to me so that I know it. And Yoav answered, Yahweh does add to his people 100 times more than they are, but my master the sovereign, are there not all my master's servants? Why does my master seek to do this? Why should he be a cause of guilt in Israel? But the sovereign's word prevailed against Yoav, and Yoav left and went throughout all of Israel and came back to Jerusalem. Keep that all exactly in your head. Now let's go to 2 Samuel, okay? 2 Samuel chapter 24, okay? 2 Samuel chapter 24, and we want to go to verse 1 there. And again, the displeasure of Yahweh burned against Israel and moved David against them to say, go number Israel and Judah. What? Who did this? Well, I don't see Satan. Where's this guy, this person? The displeasure of Yahweh burned against Israel and moved David. Yahweh moved David to number Israel. Is it saying that? Am I wrong? Now, you might say, well, maybe this is a different situation. Listen to verse 2. And the sovereign said to Yoav, the commander of the army, who was with him, go please throughout all the tribes of Israel from Dan to Beersheba and register the people so they know the number of them. Isn't that exactly what it said in Chronicles? And Yoav said to the sovereign, even if Yahweh Elohim does add to the people 100 times more, and the eyes of their master the sovereign see it, but why does the master the sovereign delight in this matter? Isn't that exactly more or less what it says in 1 Chronicles? Slightly different wording, same point though. Verse 4, however, the sovereign's word prevailed against Yoav and against the commanders of the army, and Yoav went with his commanders out from the presence of the sovereign and registered the people. We're talking about the exact same incident, are we not? 1 Chronicles, and Satan stood up against Israel. 2 Samuel, Yahweh's displeasure burned against Israel, and he moved David to number Israel. Not what you were taught in church, huh? Now, that's not to say he didn't use a being that's an adversary to inspire David, but it came from Yah. Yah's displeasure burned, and he moved David to number Israel. It says, the displeasure of Yahweh burned and moved David to, against them to say, go number Israel. Where's Satan in Samuel? But we see him in Chronicles. The whole conversation with Joab is the same, isn't it? So we know it's the same incident. And so just understand, things that make you go, okay? Not exactly how you always saw Satan. Not exactly as you always saw Satan. All right, let's go to Zechariah 3. All right? Zechariah 3. Oops. Zechariah 3. All right. Verse 1. And he showed me Yehoshua the high priest standing before the messenger of Yahweh, and Satan standing at his right hand to be an adversary to him. Okay? This is actually where it says HaSatan. It says, the Satan standing at the right hand, the adversary. And so it's a role of a being standing at his right hand. Do you know in Israel, the prosecutor in a court case is called HaSatan, the accuser, the one who's accusing the person on trial, the defendant, right? It's called Satan in a court case. Verse 2, and Yahweh said to HaSatan, Yahweh rebuke you, HaSatan. Yahweh has chosen Jerusalem, rebuke you. Who has chosen Jerusalem, rebuke you. Is this not brand plucked from the fire? So when it says he's rebuking him, let's kind of get into what this is really talking about. Satan said what he had to say as an accuser, and Yahweh said, you're wrong. Okay? He wasn't rebuking him like we think, get away from me, Satan, or rebuke him to cast him out. He said, you're wrong. You're just wrong. You're not right in this case. Would we agree this now? They're standing there kind of in a court case. He showed him Joshua the high priest standing before the messenger, and Satan standing there as an adversary. And Yahweh said to Satan, Yahweh rebuke you. Okay? Yahweh has chosen Jerusalem. He says no. I mean, you can read the rest of the story. But Satan is standing there, this HaSatan. So is this a being, or is this, again, somebody playing a role? I don't know. We could think it's a being, like meaning a unique being, that's actually the one being that, but this is a being standing at the right hand. Literally, it says Satan standing at his right hand. Isn't that a place most people wanted to be? Like even like James and John arguing about, or their mother saying, let my son stand at your right hand. Let them sit at your right hand. Like that's an honored position. It's an important position. Here's Satan. What in the world is he doing there? At his right hand. This is Yahweh's right hand. He's got a role to make his case, and Yahweh can say, enough, rebuke you. Okay? I should have looked up rebuke. I should maybe do that. I'll bring it out next time. But I'm just saying is, he was just not rebuke you like, get out of my throne room. He's like, I disagree with you. You're wrong. Case closed. Okay? So it's kind of like a judge going, overruled. Okay? Satan made an objection and he said, overruled. Maybe that's a better interpretation in this case. I'll look at my attorney over here, right? That's kind of what's going on here, isn't it? He's saying, overruled. Yahweh said to Satan, overruled. Yahweh has chosen Jerusalem, and right, overruled. I get to decide. You can accuse all you want. That's what it seems like to me, okay? Interesting. Let's go to Psalm, do I really want to do this? Well, let's just go there and I'll see. Psalm 109. I have this in my notes as like a maybe. I don't know, I know you guys don't know what that's all about because that's just the way I write notes to myself here, but we'll go to Psalm 109. All right, so in verse 6, it says, appoint over him one who is wrong, and let an accuser stand at his right hand. So it's talking about a court sort of case here, in my opinion, okay? Verse 1, do not be silent, O Elohim, of my praise, for the mouth of the wrong and the mouth of the deceiver have opened against me. They have spoken against me with a false tongue. They have surrounded me with words of hatred. They attack me without a cause. In return for my love, they accuse me while I am in prayer. Boy, this sounds like my life. And they repay me evil for good and hatred for love. Appoint over him one who is wrong. Let an accuser stand at his right hand. When he is judged, let him be found wrong, and let his prayer become sin. Let his days be few. This sounds exactly like the same thing happening that we just read in Zechariah, doesn't it? Like a court case. All right, let somebody be his accuser. Point somebody as an accuser. Again, the word there is Satan. Okay, Satan. Now we're going to get into the place that most people are used to starting with when it comes to Satan, which is in the book of Job. Let's go to Job, okay? So that we understand, chapter 1. Remember, we are trying to understand the truth from Scripture about whatever we're talking about. In this case, it's Satan. We've talked about evil, we talked about sin, we talked about righteousness, we talked about belief, we've talked about salvation, right? We're trying to understand what does it really say. And I think we're already seeing that it does not describe Satan necessarily the way you were always told. I'm not making him a good guy or the role a good guy, okay? It's still not what you were told. Because we were told basically this being is to blame for everything. Have you seen Satan yet to blame for anything? You might say, well, what about in the garden? He's not even called Satan in the garden. He's still not to blame. Oh, sure, he tempted her. He talked to her. Well, he's still not to blame. Okay? Remember the subtitle was this, did the devil make you do it? I don't think so. I don't think so. Stop saying the devil made you do it. Man, all of a sudden I want to do my Flip Wilson, never mind. Okay? The devil made me do it. All right, never mind. All right? Okay, or whatever that guy was on Saturday Night Live. Satan, church lady, remember that? But stop it, okay? There's no outside being causality-wise, like a causally making you do anything. By the way, neither does the king of the universe make you do anything. Nobody can make you do anything. I can literally walk over to you with a gun in my hand, put it right in your face, and I still can't make you do anything. You can still choose not to do something. There's nothing I can do to make you do anything. Neither can an outside being that you can't even see. And we need to stop pointing that finger away from ourselves at something else. Okay? Just like I keep trying to tell you, when you do good, you get credit. Now, did you need his help, his inspiration, his whatever? Sure. But you still had to be the one that did it. You know what? You're here right now keeping Shabbat. You're doing that. He doesn't get credit for that. He gets credit for creating Shabbat, for opening your mind that you're supposed to keep Shabbat. You get credit because you're here. You're keeping Shabbat. He's not keeping Shabbat through you or you through him. You're actually keeping Shabbat. Okay? And if you choose not to keep Shabbat, don't blame somebody because you broke it. You chose not to keep Shabbat. You chose to do whatever it is that you shouldn't do. Now, you may have that voice in your head encouraging you one way or the other. Still your choice. The still small voice may say, you need to be here on Shabbat. When you start thinking, oh, I'm tired, I don't know if I want to go, blah, 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 right? And then the other voice is like, yeah, you're tired, you should just stay home. And so you got two voices, like the little shoulder thing, devil, angel, whatever thing. Those are like good metaphors for voices in your head that are trying to give you a little push one way or the other, but you're still making the choice, okay? Don't blame mom or dad because they influenced you in some way. You made choices. Don't blame friends and siblings. You made the choices. Don't blame pastors and rabbis. You made the choices, okay? I made some dumb decisions financially when I first came into belief, okay, whatever, where, I had a DJing business. I was doing parties and DJs, because everybody in the 80s was a DJ, okay? So if you were from the 80s, all right? And I was making good money. When I say good money for all you kids out there, I was making $150 an hour in 1981. That's like 500 an hour today, okay? And so, understand, I was doing that. I also had a karate school, all right? That's 1987. And so ministries told me, well, those are not appropriate things to be doing as a Christian, and blah, 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 blah. And I listened, and so I quit the businesses, stopped making money, still owed money on the building that I was renting for the school or whatever, or the loan that I had taken out, whatever. I paid all that off. But the thing is, I made that choice. I can't blame the pastor that told me all that, okay? I listened, considered, and at where I was at the time, I agreed. I wouldn't agree today, okay? But I agreed then. So should I get mad that the pastor told me to do these things? No. I still had to make the choice. You see what I'm saying? I'm just giving you a personal example of what I'm talking about. Those choices cost me a lot of money, had me in pretty good debt because I'd taken out loans to start my school and get the equipment and all that other stuff. Only had the school open a year, a little over a year. Had a 5-year loan to pay off. Still had to pay it off with no school, no money coming in, nothing. But I made that choice because I chose to allow an influence because I respected the person who was doing the influence at the time, and it seemed like the right thing to do, so I'm not, blaming anybody. We have made I'm speaking for all of us now, all of us have made lots of bad decisions, having thought it through, thinking it made sense and everything else, and it still turned out not to be the best decision. That happens, okay? Stop blaming. You're never gonna get where you need to go, growth-wise, emotionally, etc., if you cannot get past this blame game, okay? Own it. If you did it, you can fix it. If somebody else did it, how can you fix it? It's their fault, and then you need someone else to fix it. If it's your fault, you can fix it. Does that make any sense? Oh, but where's God and all that? The one that's in the small voice going, you can do it. Matter of fact, you need to do it because it's part of your growth. Of course he's there and involved. But he's just not like Christianity tried to teach you. This is not like you're this little, tennis ball being passed back, something being passed back and forth between the devil and the bad stuff and God and the good stuff, and you're just kind of floating around in the middle, really have nothing to do with nothing. You get no credit for anything good you do, and you don't get any blame for anything bad that happens because it's either one or the other gets the credit. Where's the point of that? No wonder you're lost and miserable. Because you got no ownership. Okay? You gotta get credit where credit is due and give credit where credit is due. So when I'm successful, I praise him for giving me the whatever tools I needed to go out there and do it. But I also feel good about me because I did it. Okay? Not one parent, when their child does something great, goes nothing to the kid and just says, God gets all the credit. No, you go over and praise that kid, say, good job, great job, I'm proud of you, right? Don't you do that with the kids? Don't they need that? They thrive on that. And then you're gonna grow up an adult and believe that nothing is your value, nothing is to your credit, nothing is for your worth? That's crazy. That's just wrong. Christianity did that to you, okay? And I'm only saying these things so you people listening who are still dealing with some Christianity stuff, you gotta understand that system did these things to you, okay? I'm not picking on you if you're a Christian. You were lied to. I was a Christian for a period of time in a Torah-keeping whatever type of church, but it was still a Christian. I thought I was a Christian. And that system lied to me too. And I suffered from some of the decisions I made because I bought into the lies. And a lot of you are suffering a lot of self-worth, self-esteem, self-image problems because the church lied to you that you don't get any of that anyway. Nothing good is yours, nothing bad is yours. You're just sort of existing. I don't even know what that is, okay? So here we go now to Job. Hey, Job chapter 1 and verse 6. And we're gonna hear Satan, HaSatan mentioned a lot, okay? In verse 6, 7, 8, 9, and 12, all right? That's 5 times here in chapter 1. So, there was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and straight, and one who feared Elohim and turned aside from evil. Whoa. So he actually was a good man. He's getting credit for being righteous. He's getting credit for being perfect and straight. He was perfect and straight. He was a man of Elohim. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. And his possessions were 7,000 sheep and 3,000, he had a lot of stuff. Verse 4, and his sons went and had a feast in the house each day, and sent and invited for their 3 sisters to come and eat and drink with them. And it came to be, when the days of feasting had gone around, that Job would send and set them apart, and he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings, the number of them all for Job. And it might be that my sons have sinned and cursed Elohim. So he would even make sacrifices on behalf of his kids, right? Now watch what happens in verse 6. And the day came to be that the sons of Elohim came to present themselves before Yahweh, and Satan, it actually says HaSatan in the Hebrew there, and HaSatan also came among them. What is he doing there? If you understood him the way church taught you, Christianity taught you, excuse me, HaSatan? When the children of Elohim are coming to present themselves before Yahweh himself, and he's there? Surely immediately Yahweh's going to say, excuse me, what are you doing here? Get out. No. Yahweh says to Satan, so where do you come from? It's like a normal social greeting. Where have you been? What's going on? How you doing? What? And Satan, this is HaSatan, right? The Satan, answered Yahweh and said, from diligently searching in the earth and from walking up and down in it. Which is basically saying to his boss, I was doing what you sent me out to do. Okay, my job is to search the earth and walk up and down in it. And so Yahweh said to HaSatan, have you considered? Now, bear in mind, this is exactly a flow out of, I was doing my job, walking around the earth, seeking and searching. And so that means he's considering various people in some way. He says, well, what about, while you've been doing this, going all over the place, have you considered my servant Job? That there is none like him on the earth, a perfect and straight man who fears Elohim and turns aside from evil. And Satan says to Yahweh, is Job fearing Elohim for nothing? In other words, is there like no reason? Maybe you spoil him or something, right? Because anybody ever have that where one parent might say to the other, oh, well, of course they listen to you because you spoil them, because you do this for them, because you do that for them. That's kind of what Job is saying. Satan is saying here about Job. He says, have you not made a hedge around him? In other words, you protected him and kept everything away from him and around his household and all that he has on every side. And you have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. See, Satan is not connecting things right. That's when all of you don't connect things right. You act sometimes like a Satan. Instead of saying, because he's righteous before me, he has received these blessings. If you guard and keep, we read that in the Torah portion last night, then all these blessings will come upon you. Satan's got it backwards. He's saying, no, he's righteous and does all these things because you bless him. It never works that way. Try that with a child, try that with anybody. Give them the cookie first and then see if they'll clean their room. Instead of saying, clean your room and then I'll give you the cookie. Okay? It's not gonna work the other way, okay? So, do, receive, not receive, then do. So he says, verse 11, but stretch out your hand, please, and strike all that he has, and see if he would not curse you to your face. This is the oppositional, adversarial, accusing. He's got to find some way to poke at Job. Job's got nothing to poke at, so all he can poke at is, well, he only does all this because you spoil him. He's got nothing else to point at. And Yahweh says to Satan, see all that he has is in your hand, only do not lay a hand on himself. And HaSatan went out from the presence of Yahweh. Okay? And then we hear all these things happening. It doesn't say in any of these verses here that Satan necessarily did these things, but things start to happen, right? Now let's go to chapter 2. Again, in 2, 4, 6 verses, we get to talk about Job and Satan. All right, verse 1. Again, the day came to be that the sons of Elohim came to present themselves before Yahweh, and HaSatan also came among them to present himself before Yahweh. Apparently, there's like a board meeting. Then everybody's got to show up. And so he shows up. By the way, would that not mean that he was probably considered part of the sons of Elohim to some degree? Like this is somebody that worked for him, was expected to be there. Okay? And Yahweh said to Satan, from where do you come? What you been up to? Satan answered Yahweh and said, from going all the way up and down the earth and everything. And Yahweh said, have you considered my servant Job? That there's none like him on the earth, perfect, straight, all these other things, same thing again. Okay? And still he holds fast to do his integrity, although you incited me against him to destroy him without a cause. All right, so he's like, well, if you're looking back in chapter 1, I didn't read all of that, but you can see some calamity starting to happen to Job, okay? Just so you go back and you see that some things start happening to Job. So now by the time we get to chapter 2, you can see where he says, Elohim says, a perfect and straight man in verse 3, one who fears Elohim and turns aside from evil, and still he holds fast to his integrity, although you incited me against him. Who? You incited who against what? Elohim gave the permission. Remember Amunah? Everything is caused or allowed. He said, you incited me against him to destroy him without a cause. You said, take all these things away and see if he doesn't curse you. You incited me against him. So I gave you permission. Right? Cause or allow. So he's causing or really allowing Satan to do this. But this is really Yahweh's fault. He was incited to it. And he said, fine, because this is a great lesson for all of us to watch how it plays out, right? And he says, yet in his integrity. Do you understand that when we talked about this last night, about the whole reason, like the wilderness, Deuteronomy 8:2, that you're allowed to walk through your own personal wilderness, was to see if you had the integrity in your heart to keep the commandments or not, under all your adverse situations? That's why you must go through adversity, to test to see whether or not you will hold to your integrity. By the way, Job's got a bunch of really good friends. Great encouragers. Starting with his wife. Curse your God and die. She failed. Don't be like Mrs. Job. Okay? Have your integrity like Job. He says, and Satan answered Yahweh and said, skin for skin, and all that man has, all that a man has, he would give for his life. But stretch out your hand, please, and strike his bone and his flesh, if he would not curse you to his face. And Yahweh said to Satan, see, he is in your hand, only spare his life. So Satan went out of the presence and smote Job with loathsome swords. So first he took away some of his stuff. Now he's going to curse him with swords. He's going to keep doing more and more to him. And Yahweh's going to be like, but he's still there. There's a verse where he says, I can do all things through Yah, okay? That nothing's impossible for Yah, right? But Job is not going to fail in his integrity tests. Do you? Oh, but I had all this stuff and it was taken away from me, and now I don't have any. I had a big house, I don't have a house. I had a car, I don't have a car. I had this, blah, 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 blah. So what? Job has everything taken from him. Everything. His kids, his animals, his wealth, his health. His wife leaves. It's like, curse your God. Done with you. All right? It's bad. It's bad. So he says, stretch out your hand, please, and strike his bone. So Satan says, see, he's in your hand. And Satan went out and brought these sores on him in verse 7. And he took potsherd to scrape himself when he sat in the midst of the ashes. And his wife said to him, do you still hold fast your integrity? Curse Elohim and die. He said to her, you speak as one of the foolish women speak. Curse Elohim and die. He said, and 3 of his friends heard of all this. Good friends. Friends like this you don't need, okay? This is the role of the HaSatan. So let's see how this played out. I've only got a few minutes left and I don't have any more notes for today, okay? Up to this point, can we agree that everything we've seen Satan do, or someone in the role of Satan, it was serving Elohim in some way? Can we all agree? That Satan also, we have never seen do anything independently. Was there anything done independently here? Without authority and supervision and permission. So this, now I'm not saying that doesn't change, maybe. We'll see that it doesn't change. But at this point, as we're watching the story play out, starting from Genesis, we've been working through. I know we jumped to Revelation only because that's where it tells you that Genesis is talking about the serpent, the devil, Satan, etc., right? In Revelation 12 and in 20, all right? We read 2 places. But let's understand, there's nothing happening here unauthorized. There's nothing happening here that's not serving Elohim's purpose. What's the purpose we see playing out? To either A, act as an obstruction to something that should not happen, okay? Or act as an obstruction to see what you'll do with that obstruction. There were those that stood up to David. David's like, no, I'm not listening to you, obstruction, okay? The obstruction was in front of Balaam. That was an obstruction that was to keep him from being reckless. Then we see an obstruction happening with Job's life, and that's an obstruction again to test or opposing him to test his integrity. All of these things end up serving Yah's purpose. And it's to the benefit, ultimately, so far what we're seeing, potentially, right, to the benefit of everybody involved. Everybody that the Satan is standing in front of, or interfering with, or getting in the way of, or interacting with, it is potentially to the benefit of the one they're opposing, the one they're being an adversary to, the one he's being an adversary to, okay? So, did the devil make anybody do anything so far? No. Okay, if anything, he incited Elohim to give him permission to try to do something, but Elohim understood right there that, hey, I'm doing this to prove a point. I need you to see that you're wrong, that Job is a good man, and it has nothing to do with what you're saying, and you're wrong. By the way, I think he does that with all of us. At some point, he's going to stand with the accuser there and say, no, she's a good person. He's a good person. They had integrity. They clung, cleaved, and hold fast. Whatever. They held on tight. All right? Anybody remember Foster Brooks? He was a comedian that did a routine being drunk. And he'd be like, held fast. So he wouldn't get the word out, so he'd say something completely different, right? He was hysterical. So that reminded me of that because I wasn't getting the word out right. So just say it a different way, all right? So hopefully we're starting to get a proper picture. This is a serious role being played. And if there's an actual being that has that role, it's an important role, and seems to be a being with that role that keeps interacting with, at least with Elohim here in chapter 1 and 2 of Job, where he's going before Yahweh, and Yahweh's saying, hey, what you been doing? What's he up to? Oh, I've been going around doing my job. He says, yeah, well, what do you think of Job? You did all what you did to him, he's still hanging in there. Yeah, well, I only took away some of his stuff. What if you did this and wrecked his health? Say, all right, fine, do that too. Just don't kill him, all right? So what is this also saying about you going forward and how you look at your life? Is there anything he could take from you that would cause you to lose your integrity? Let me give you a sad example. I've said this before, but it's worth repeating for those who maybe didn't hear it before. We sadly had a couple in our congregation, this goes back 20-something years, okay? Way back in Knoxville years. Lived in Georgia near wherever they do the Masters, right, in Georgia, okay? Augusta, okay, lived near Augusta. And, they were probably in their 60s, okay? Probably my age now, a little older maybe, but back then, I was younger, so it seemed old. Things change as you get older, you get a different perspective. I look at 30-year-olds now and they look like they're teenagers to me. I don't know, it's different, okay? So the thing is they were older and he was not well, all right? And he had gotten, and so the two of them were acclimated to the idea that he was going to die at some point in the near future, and they prepared for it and they were okay with that. Not okay, but you know what I'm saying? They had resolved themselves to that. Sure enough, we had lost touch with them for a little while. Come to find out, she dies. She gets an aggressive cancer, and just quickly, it's boom, done. He now doesn't know what to do with himself because he wasn't planning for this. He had already accepted this other idea. He was planning for this other idea. He was fully okay with the other idea. he lost any vertical connection. He was mad at God, mad at everybody, blamed God. How dare you take her first? Where was the integrity? This is kind of a Job moment. Okay? Do you have anyone or anything in your life that if taken, you would lose your integrity? I think that's a really good question. His wife was that. Okay? If I lost my wife, I would be incredibly upset, sad, like you would expect me to be. I would not get angry with him. Is there anything you could lose in your life, health, wealth, people, whatever, that could cause your integrity with him to break? I think that's part of why we have the Job account in here. Because Yah says, no, he's a good man. And Satan's like, no, because you do this, this, and this for him. He says, fine, take it away. And he does. He says, see, still got integrity, takes away more. See, still got integrity, takes away more. Still got integrity. I'm like, seriously? You know, you can't beat that, you know? Okay, so it's actually in Job 42. Job answers Yahweh and says, you know that you are able to do all and that no purpose is withheld from you. Do you have that? That's Job's attitude after all of this. You can do all things, and nothing can be withheld with you. So where's my integrity supposed to, why would I never keep my integrity? You can do anything. You cause and allow. Where's your emunah? Okay? Fully trusting and believing that he's fully in charge, and everything happens either because he causes or allows. Period. End. Story. No, that's it. Period. All right? Because that was the verse I was looking for there, was 42:2. All of a sudden my brain remembered back to the days that I was studying that, where that address was. Okay? You know that you're able to do all, that no purpose withheld from you. But then we have to understand, that means that Satan, or anybody even in that role, can't really do unless he allows. Because everything's about his purpose. Everything in Job we can see is Satan being allowed, given permission. So if he's messing with you, guess who gave him permission? And maybe that's because you're being reckless. We talked about that from Numbers 22, right? Maybe because you're being reckless before him. In other words, there's a reason. Now Job just gets to be, unfortunately, useful for a testimony. Job didn't deserve any of this. And by the way, he gives it back. You know what Job gets after this? Double. Everything. I don't know if they got him 2 wives, but it got him double everything. I was going to make a joke and said, well, he was getting blessings back, so 2 wives would not have been. Never mind. So, all right. But he was given double. Why was he given double? For allowing Yah to use him for this so we can read it. Allowing Yah to let him go through all of that. He says, I used you. Yah's saying, look, I used you. I wanted to make a point, wanted it written down, I wanted everybody to hear it. And yes, it was awful, it sucked, it was terrible. So I'm going to give you everything double. Okay? Plus, he got to learn a little bit about his wife. Not so good. Okay? Not so good. All right, so I think it's really important that we get this, okay? We're starting to understand, hopefully, that there is absolutely a Satan role that plays in your life from time to time. Whether it's the actual being that we refer to as HaSatan, or just other people coming into your life as adversaries and doing Satan-like roles, okay? But they're caused or allowed from above to serve his purpose. So you can't say the devil made you do it. Okay? Don't blame anything outside of you. The only one who makes you do anything is you. Okay? Nobody can make you do anything. God can't make you do anything. Matter of fact, he sits back almost crying, watching you not listen. Where would be the growth? Where would be the free will? Where would be the uniqueness that you would bring into this forever if he could just make you do everything? Then he would just make rocks do it or whatever. He wouldn't need you to have all of you in there, okay? with your flavor and personality and quirkiness and goofiness and seriousness and whatever. You bring your stuff, okay? One of the things I love about all of you is you're different. Every one of you is different. I don't ever sit down and talk to somebody and go, man, you're exactly like this other person. Like I might as well be talking to them. You're not. Everybody's different. Now, you may do something that's similar to somebody, but as a full package, as a whole, you are not the same as anybody. You're not. Okay? Which is, by the way, as a quick side before we get to the afterburn here, when it comes to personal development, health, anything, yes, go out there and study and listen to what other people teach, but understand, just because it worked for somebody else doesn't mean it will work for you. You got to figure out what works for you. So try things that are out there. Try lots of different things, okay? Because if you listen enough, especially with health, for example, wealth is a little bit more consistent. Everybody says pretty much the same stuff. When it comes to health, you need to eat one meal a day. You need to eat 5 times a day, okay? You need to eat only meat. The meat's terrible. You need only vegetables. Vegetables are terrible. You eat only, everything's opposite, okay? Everything's opposite. And they are adamantly opposite. Like the opposite is death, okay? Okay, eating meat is death. No, plants are killing you. They've got protective things in their makeup that they're killing you. You know what? They're both right to some degree. It just depends on what you're doing and how you're doing it. But you know what? Your body is different than everybody else's to some little degree. Figure out what works for you, right? So the same thing with this walk, okay? You are your own unique person. He gives us instruction, okay? Certain things, do this, don't do that. And within the framework that he gives you, there are some little nuances of levels of where you could do it your own way. Some things can just be done your own way, and yet you're still doing it, okay? Sabbath is 24 hours. I promise you, if I asked every single one of you what you do for 24 hours, there'll be some differences, and yet you're still keeping Shabbat, okay? In other words, let's assume none of you did anything you shouldn't do on Shabbat, but yet what you do and how you do it and how much time you do and everything else is going to be unique to you. Well, yet you're all keeping it though. So understand, while we're reading this, you're getting this great generalization that there's going to be Satans in your life that are going to be obstructing, adversarial, opposing what you're trying to do or whatever, or opposing what you're trying to do because you need to be opposed, like the one that Balaam was facing. Okay, sometimes that opposition is good. So that's where you have to get real curious and go, okay, I'm hitting up against obstruction. I wonder if that's because I'm wrong or because they're testing my integrity and opposing me when I need to keep going. Get curious, don't just assume. It could be one or the other, right? It could be a good obstruction that needs to stop you, or it could be an obstruction you need to work through and go past, okay, and overcome. So I really want you to start to get this. I think this teaching is going to really set you free from a bunch of stuff and really strengthen you ultimately in your walk. Because remember, ultimately we want to be like Job. Job is the well-done, good and trustworthy servant of this book. He's the best example, other than Yeshua, of the well-done, good and trustworthy servant. That's my opinion. You know why? Because he's the only one that Yahweh points out that way. He goes, consider my servant Job. Of everybody on the planet, that's who he picked. That's pretty good. That guy's doing his job. And he knew what HaSatan would do. And he had no worries that Job would pass the test. Because he wasn't trying to test Job. He was trying to make a point that we could all read about, to show what integrity looks like under all of the stresses, strains, and attacks, and oppositions, and obstructions, etc. What does that look like when everything is falling apart around you? Because what you normally do is say, well, where's God? He abandoned me. He's forsaken me. I don't see Job doing that anywhere. His friends are kind of not helping, you know. He calls them lousy comforters. All right, some of you are lousy comforters too. Some of you spouses are lousy comforters to your spouse. When they're struggling, you attack them instead of trying to figure out how to help them and encourage them. Well, of course this is all going bad because you're an idiot. That's not a good comforter. But spouses do that to each other. Terrible, terrible. All right, let's go before the Father. Father, we come before you, and Father, we're just so excited about you revealing and exposing and sharing with us the truth about this tool that you use in our lives called HaSatan, or devil, or adversary, or whatever other word we'd use for the obstructions, those who oppose. And we're excited to understand that so that we can then embrace properly why you're allowing these things in our lives at times. We understand that sometimes you're blocking us from something because we need to be stopped. And sometimes you're blocking us from things because you want to see, will we keep going anyway? In other words, when we're doing what's right, can we be stopped? Actually, I think that's really what you're looking for. Under the circumstances, can you be stopped? Can you be stopped when you're doing something you shouldn't? Then you should be stopped. But can you? Some of you can't be stopped. Some of us can't be stopped. And when we're doing something that we're doing that's right, and someone tries to stop us, can you be stopped when you shouldn't be stopped? And Father, I ask that you give us the discernment to know which is which. Give us the wisdom to ask. It's got to start with asking. Father, give us that wisdom to ask, are you blocking me because you want me to push through? Or are you blocking me because I'm being reckless? Are you blocking me because it's something I'm not seeing? I think that's the best part about the story with Balaam, is that the metaphor that's used there is that he could not see, okay? Not so much that he couldn't see the obstruction, he couldn't see why there was an obstruction because he didn't listen. He didn't do the whole instruction. He was reckless. He couldn't see that he was being reckless. Some of us get hung up on the idea, well, he couldn't see the angel because he was invisible. Well, no, he couldn't see what caused the angel to be there. Why was he there with his sword ready to kill him? So, Father, help us to have that wisdom to ask, to be curious when things seem like there's opposition or there's obstruction or there's adversaries or we're being slandered and accused, etc. So that we can react to it properly. So we know which ones to plow through and which ones to stop and reevaluate and go in a different direction. So, Father, we thank you for this discernment. We thank you for the word that you put all this in so we can read about it. We thank you for letting Job go through this stuff so that we can learn from it. We thank you for Job having enough integrity to get through it properly so that we could see it and learn from it. And so, Father, we thank you for all these things as we come to you now in the name above all names, Yeshua our Messiah. And together we say, Amen, Amen, Amen.